This media is brought to you by Polyscope.
In the realm of tomorrow, where techniques mind, we ponder, we dream.
Good morning and welcome to Think Future. It's show number 1065, and today we're going to talk a little bit about hierarchies. You know, I find it really interesting that no matter what we try to do as human beings, no matter how fair we try to make things, we always fall back into hierarchies and classes. Now, one of those things that supposedly was supposed to differentiate America from every other country was the abolition, or the abolishment, the replacement, the removal of a class system. Now, if you go back to all sorts of other countries, you go to India, you go to Britain, you go to most of Europe, there were classes. People were born in classes, and they were basically stuck in classes. It was almost impossible to, if you were a member of the poor, if you're a member of the upper classes. So the middle class was actually a recent addition to the classes. So you had the poor, you had the rich, and you had the poor. And then eventually, when we had industrialization, we'd be able to bring in the middle class. So we had stratification. We still have stratification. And one of the things that we were trying to break away from during the creation of America was to remove this stratification, to eliminate the class system. So if anybody worked hard and was really good at what they were doing, they would be able to go from being very poor to very rich. They would be able to go up the ladder and transfer from one class to the next and move up the chain. And the barriers to entry from movement from between classes were much lower. Where in other countries, if you're born in a particular class, and in some of the countries where there's a caste system, it's very, very strict, like India, it was it was actually impossible. In some cases it was impossible. In the past it was impossible. Maybe today it's a little more possible. But it was impossible to move from one caste to another. It was impossible to go from a lower caste to an upper caste. And in fact, it was really frowned upon, and people were not allowed to go from one caste to the next. So the class system is alive and well in many countries in the world. And one of the ideas behind America, at least as far as I'm concerned, is that it was to get away from that class system. So if you worked hard and you did well and you were ambitious, you would be able to go from whatever class you were to an upper class. You would be able to improve yourself with ambition and hard work and get to those upper levels. Now, I think what's happened is that we still have a class system in the United States. It is there. It's a little more hidden. It's not as obvious as it is in other places, but we still have that class system in America. And what's interesting to me is that class system, originally, when the internet first started, that class system did not exist. It really, truly was the Wild West, where people from every class and every age and every type could mix and meld and be with each other. And it was really cool because you had the ability to communicate with all sorts of other individuals from anywhere else. And I still believe that the biggest promise of the internet is the ability for any human being on the planet to communicate with any other human being on the planet. And there was a period of time when we could conceivably do that. But now we have so many intermediaries between individuals that it's extremely difficult for any human being on the planet to communicate with any other human being on the planet, especially in other countries. So these intermediaries have come in, and what the intermediaries have done, which I find interesting in social networks, is that they have recreated the class system. Social networks now also have a class system, and various social networks have different class systems. TikTok's class system, and Instagram's class system, and X's class system, and Facebook's class system are all completely different class systems. And LinkedIn also has a class system. And what's happened is that each of these algorithms, even though they're all different, they all do the exact same thing. And I tell you what the problem is. It's very simple. When Facebook first started, or any of these social networks, you would be able to post something and all of your followers or everybody who was following you would be able to see that. But then it got to a point where, I forget exactly where it happened, but there was a certain period of time, there was a point in which they realized that there's no possible way, due to the volume of the things that was being sent out, that your followers would be able to see everything that you posted, right? Even if you had, 50 followers or something like that, at the point where you only had 50 followers or something like that, then, and this is the early days of Twitter, every one of your followers would see your posts. But then once you started getting beyond a certain number of followers, let's use the 250 number, I forget who came up with that, 250 followers. Once you got past 250 followers, then the social network had to decide on your behalf who saw what message. And some of them actually used this as a money-making tool. They used it as a promote your post or augment your post or whatever, maybe for $6 or $7 or whatever. They would actually show your post to more people who followed you. Instead of showing it to everybody who followed you for free, which is what they used to do, now they show it to more people if you pay them. And what's happened now is, in addition to that, is that because there's so much volume on these networks, and people have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of followers, then the algorithm itself has to decide who sees what. So you get these weird disparities where you say, I have 10,000 followers on X, but only about 100 of them actually see this message, because the algorithm has to decide who sees what. And that's where the class system has been implemented. So in all of these social networks, we have hierarchies of class. We have lower class people, and sometimes it lines up with the number of followers. We have middle class, and we have upper classes. The upper classes are seen by everyone all the time. The middle classes are seen by some people some of the time, and the lower classes are never seen by anyone any of the time. So what they try to do, and what they try to get you to do, and how they keep you on these social networks, is that they start you in a lower class, and they keep you trying to grab your way up to the middle class and the upper classes in these social networks. And it's incredibly difficult and fun to try and get yourself up there. But what it does is it drives you to create more content. And if you create more content, then you create more content on behalf of the networks, and the networks use this content to drive more users. So in the end, like everyone says, if something's free, you are the product. The stuff that you create, the content that you're creating and putting into these networks, is being used by these networks to make money for them. Not for you, for them. There are a few that actually pay the content creators, but they usually pay them a pittance because they want more money out of it. And the more they pay you, and the more opaque the rules are for getting paid, the more chances are that you're going to keep trying and trying. It's kind of like a one-armed bandit, right? You pull that one-armed bandit, and maybe some days you'll make some money, and other days you won't make money. But the class system is alive and well and baked in to each and every social network. So here's my challenge to you. Wouldn't it be great if we could build a social network which didn't have classes, where everybody was on the same keel and everybody was able to communicate with everybody else? The original promise of the internet. Could we ever have that today? Is it possible in this 8 billion human world that we have today that we can actually return to person-to-person communication, where anyone in the world can talk to anyone in the world? Is that even possible? Can we build a social network that does have that capability? I wonder. That's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.